Hello and welcome to yet another video. This is the 12th episode of the story, in which Naruto sets out to discover his true reason for being Hokage. Look out, Ninja World! A new Naruto Uzumaki has arrived. Please like and subscribe to show your support. Let's get the show started. It was morning as Ino made her way through the streets of Konoha. She smiled as she took a big breath, enjoying the fresh air. Being raised by a flower shop owner, she knew to appreciate nature. The fragrances of plants and the rich air that the forest surrounding the village brought were things that she really loved. The Leaf Village was like a paradise to her. Ino kept a steady pace, wondering what kind of training she would go through today. Learning medical jutsu was her prime wish, but Tsunade wanted to take care of her weaknesses first. It wasn't until their training started that she realized just how many weaknesses she had. Her jutsu left her wide open and her taijutsu wasn't where she wanted it to be. At times like this, she wondered just how much training her dad and teachers had gone through to be where they are. She turned a corner to see the Ninja Academy. A smile adorned her face, watching the building through the fence that surrounded it. There were a few Chunin walking into the building already, among them a smiling Irika. He had probably been the only teacher to really like that job in her opinion. She remembered how not all of them could hold it together and, although he clearly didn't at times, he was still cheerful each morning. It seemed things hadn't changed for him. The smile suddenly faded when she saw the lone swing hanging from a tree. A sudden image of a young Naruto sitting on it with a depressed look flashed through her mind, and she couldn't help but look away. She knew from watching him that he wasn't completely over that pain. It was as if he had just pushed it away. He might have all of those fake smiles and words, but his eyes never lied. She could always see a wave of sadness wash over them whenever something brought up his childhood. The kunoichi shook her head, ridding herself of those thoughts. It wouldn't do her any good to linger on them. Getting over that pain was something he had to do alone, and, as much as she wanted to help, she couldn't. She was glad that he really liked the time he spent with her and her family. She could always see it. He needed something like this. She passed by the academy and finally made it to her destination, a 2-story home standing proudly on the street. This was the home of her teacher Tsunade. Ino didn't know why she didn't just get a bigger home, since the legendary medic was certainly capable. Her answer had been a laugh and a rather simple explanation. Aside from the fact that her last gambling streak had left her with close to no cash, she was simply a modest person. She didn't care where she lived as long as she had enough room to move around and put her many books and notes. Ino walked to the home's door, knocking on it loudly since she knew that her teacher was not a morning person and needed this kind of noise in order to wake up. She waited patiently before hearing the familiar sound of footsteps followed by a thud and a low curse. The doorknob turned. Before the door finally opened to reveal a shirtless Naruto with a necklace she had never seen around his neck. "Ino?" Naruto mumbled, still half asleep. The kunoichi blushed and snapped her head to the side. "What are you doing, Naruto?" she scolded. "Put a shirt on." The blonde Chunin cocked his head to the side. "Why should I do that?" he asked. "I'm always like this when I go swimming." "It's not a big deal, right?" Ino gritted her teeth and snapped her head back to Naruto, prepared to yell at him before taking note of the cast on his right arm. "What happened to your arm?" she asked in worry. Not caring about his lack of shirt anymore, she entered the home and closed the door behind her. "Did you use the jutsu again?" Naruto smiled and shook his head. "I was hit by an attack, but I'm all better now," he affirmed, waving his right arm for emphasis. "See? Granny Tsunade healed it yesterday right after I got here." "You got here yesterday?" Ino asked in slight surprise. Her boyfriend nodded and walked towards the home's kitchen, his feet tapping against the wooden floors. She followed after him and pouted. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Well, it was late when I got here," he began, opening the fridge and looking over what it held. Behind him, Ino sat on a chair and watched her boyfriend look around the fridge with a look of disgust on his face. She guessed that he hadn't been here before. Being a medic and a gambler made Tsunade's diet a little odd, mostly consisting of odd food with many types of drinks. "There's nothing to eat," he muttered before turning back to Ino with a grin. "Anyway, It was late and I decided to wait until today to visit you. The kunoichi nodded with a smile before pouting her lips in confusion. Why are you here anyway? She asked. Shouldn't you be in the hospital or your apartment? Naruto let out a chuckle and sat on a chair next to Ino's. Granny said that she didn't trust me to be alone in my apartment, so she took me here. The blonde crossed his arms. So, what are you doing here, Ino? Were you looking for Granny? Ino instantly smiled, remembering that Naruto still didn't know of her latest news. Yeah, I was looking for Tsunade, she began, her eyes lighting up in excitement. I'm her new student and she said she was going to train me today. That's great, Naruto smiled proudly. You'll get stronger in no time. Yeah, she agreed. I'm already learning a lot and it's only been a few days. Where is she anyway? She's over at the hospital, he informed, raising from his chair and letting out a sigh. She told me to meet her there at 9 for a quick checkup. He turned to Ino with a smile. Do you want to go together? Of course, she smiled as a light blush graced her cheeks. Her boyfriend had yet to put on a shirt, but could you put a shirt on first? Naruto nodded and left the room, leaving a smiling Ino behind. She was worried about his injuries, but having him back safe and sound brought her a sense of relief that outweighed the worry. The only bad thing was that she would need to go training and wouldn't be able to spend much time with him. Ino stood from her seat and walked towards the front door. She would just need to make most of the time she got to spend with Naruto. Besides, she was still free at night, and if she wasn't too tired then they could go on a date or, in the most likely case, if she is completely tired then she can just invite him over for dinner. The only thing she wished for was that Tsunade wouldn't drive her until she dropped, but it was only wishful thinking on her part. She knew that her master wouldn't tone down their training. The third Hokage sat behind his desk with his eyes closed. He would have a meeting with the council in a few hours, a meeting that would have several people panicking over the loss of a Sharingan. It wouldn't surprise him if he spent the whole day there. You're looking a bit tired, old man, came the voice of Jiraiya. The sage leaned against an open window by the third's desk with his arms crossed and a small smirk on his face. I am tired, the third responded with a sigh before reaching under his desk. What brings you here, Jiraiya? He asked, taking out his pipe and lighting its contents. You seem a little agitated. Jiraiya grinned as his old teacher placed the pipe on his mouth. After all this years, the man still knew him well. You heard about Naruto's team coming back, right? The Hokage nodded with an almost curious expression on his face. You of all people probably won't like this, but something messed with his seal on his last mission. The reaction was instant. The third's gaze grew firm and his eyes narrowed. What happened? Apparently someone tried to give him control of the Kyuubi's chakra without any influence to his mind, he began. It did work, but something went wrong and now his chakra and the foxes are isolated from each other. Long story short, Naruto will not be able to use its chakra anymore. I see, the third muttered. He hadn't been expecting this in the slightest. What were the odds of having such a complex seal altered? Is there any danger to him? Jiraiya shook his head. From what I've seen so far, there isn't any kind of secondary effect. He paused before running a hand through his hair. I'll check on the seal one more time next time I see him. But the thing that worried me is that someone out there knows a way to manipulate a demon's chakra with a few seals. It shouldn't be so surprising, the Hokage responded. There are all kinds of people in the world that specialize in different things. At least one person should know how to control a tailed beast. Anyway, I heard that there was some kind of falling on Naruto's team. The Toad Sage began. What do you plan to do about it? The Hokage took a drag out of his pipe before letting out a cloud of smoke. From Tsunade's earlier report, she said that Sasuke's right eye is gone. The council will want to punish Naruto for taking one of their Sharingan, but I won't allow it, he affirmed. The thing I'm looking over right now is how to go about Sasuke. When a ninja attacks his own teammates we usually just lock them up, but this being the last Uchiha, I'm sure the council will do everything on its power to override my decision. You're the Hokage, Jiraiya deadpanned. Shouldn't you be the one to have control over your ninja? This is a special case, the third responded. With him being the last of his clan, he falls under the clan protection program. The council has control of this and can override a few of my decisions. I'm sure this is one of those few cases. Jiraiya scowled. Then what are you going to do? I know that I won't be able to lock him up, the third stated, letting out a cloud of smoke, but that doesn't mean that I can't still punish him. I can't have him think that he can get away with anything. That would just result in repeats of this mission. Naruto let out a frustrated sigh. Everything was perfect. He had a steaming bowl of ramen before him, the weather was great, and most of all, Ino sat next to him enjoying her own bowl of ramen. It was a perfect day, but something was very wrong. He couldn't eat the heavenly meal since he couldn't use chopsticks with his left hand. He tried, but he just couldn't use them properly. I'm tired of watching you do that, Ino sighed out. Naruto turned to the kunoichi, eyes widening slightly when she moved closer to him. Ino, he muttered in surprise as she used her chopsticks to dig into his plate and put the ramen right in front of his mouth. The girl smiled as she inched the chopsticks closer. You can't eat by yourself, so I'll help you. Open up, she ordered in a light tone. Naruto blushed slightly as he opened his mouth and was greeted by an unforgettable taste of ramen. He smiled in appreciation as his girlfriend continued feeding him. Enjoying your meal, I see, someone muttered behind them. The couple turned to see a smiling Kakashi with a book on hand. Yo. Kakashi-sensei. Naruto muttered in confusion. The Jonin set his book to the side. It's been a while, Naruto, he stated before sitting next to him, his eyes showing a hint of sadness. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. Ino blushed slightly and shook her head. We were just eating here, she affirmed with Naruto nodding in agreement. But what are you doing here? Kakashi set his book down and turned to his student. I've heard what happened with Sasuke from Jiraiya, he stated. Ino turned to Naruto with a questioning gaze, watching his eyes lose their usual warmth. I just wanted to say that I don't blame you for any of it. If it really happened the way you said it did, then you are not to be blamed. But you do know that it is going to affect our team, right? Naruto nodded at his teacher with a scowl on his face. Well, it's not like we've seen much of each other lately, he concluded. I mean, with me being a Chunin and with you out on missions all the time, this thing will probably pass. Right? You're right, the Jonin responded with a small chuckle. He ruffled the blonde's hair before getting up. I can't let my cute little Genin team fall apart, can I? Ino watched as the older ninja left in a cloud of smoke. She wondered what had happened on that mission. So far, all she knew was that Sasuke was in the hospital and that Naruto had something to do with it and he was keeping it bottled up inside. She frowned. She had told him that he needed to stop keeping things bottled up inside and she would let him know that she had been serious. Naruto, she called with a frown on her face. The blonde turned to his girlfriend and felt himself shrink under her powerful gaze. What happened on the mission? Naruto let out a sigh before turning away from the kunoichi. You know you can tell me, right? You don't have to keep it bottled up inside. Sasuke attacked me during the mission, he began. Ino's eyes widened at the revelation. Just what kind of mission had they been on? It was during the middle of a plan. He put the entire team in danger and I was forced to fight him seriously. In the end he ran at me and, without looking, I cut right through his right eye. Well, he deserved it. Ino declared with a firm nod. She had had no idea that Sasuke would do something like that. Sure, she barely knew him, but she still thought that he would attack his own teammates, during a mission no less. A hint of worry flashed through her eyes when she gazed at Naruto once more. Are you all right with all of this? She asked, hoping that he didn't blame himself for everything again. He was the one who attacked. Naruto grinned before chuckling lightly. I know, he assured as he hopped off the stool. Jiraiya-sensei told me to stop blaming myself for things like that. I know that what happened to Sasuke was bad, but it wasn't my fault. He was the one who attacked and I stopped him before anyone could get killed. Ino smiled as she watched him leave. He had matured a bit. Of course he could be childish at times, but he was beginning to become a very responsible person. Not to mention that he was even stronger than Sasuke now, the guy that had been the strongest in their age group. Looks like Naruto pulled a fast one on you, Tsuchi laughed from the kitchen. Ino's eyes widened, realizing that her boyfriend had just left without paying. The man smiled. Don't worry, he does it to everyone that takes him here. Ino clenched her fists. Naruto maturing had to be some kind of joke. Naruto laughed as he walked through the hospital's hallways beside Ino, who smiled in amusement. As she was about to pay Tucci for the meal, Naruto had come back, laughing at the look on her face. After that, Ino had called him an idiot while he paid for their food with his usual foxy grin on his face. Will you stop already? Ino giggled. She had to admit that it was a good prank. The blonde Chunin chuckled once more as he approached the door. Fine, we're here anyway. He opened the door to find Tsunade sitting behind a desk with her arms crossed. It was a standard office. It had 3 large windows on the opposite wall of the door, white walls, and various bookshelves filled with loose sheets of paper and old books. Tsunade's desk stood right in front of the windows, filled with documents, books, and a few scrolls. You're late, Naruto, Tsunade declared with a glare. Both blondes flinched from her glare. The medic had that effect on people. She was very intimidating when she wanted to. What took you so long? Naruto laughed nervously, scratching the back of his head. I got lost, he answered uncertainly. Ino rolled her eyes. That had probably been the worst excuse she had ever heard. She guessed that she would need to help him. We had to eat breakfast and ran into Kakashi-sensei. Sorry we're late, it won't happen again. Tsunade smiled and nodded her head before turning to Naruto. You could learn a few manners from Ino, she teased, inwardly smiling at the annoyed pout on his face. I also want you to stop being late for everything. I won't let you become another Kakashi. Got it? Got it, Naruto muttered with an annoyed look on his face. Good, the medic responded with a smile. Ino watched the exchange with a small smile. She hadn't noticed it before, but the two had a kind of mother-son relationship. If they knew, she didn't know, but it was there. From the small amount of time she had spent with her master, she had noticed that Tsunade was a very professional person that carried herself with an air of respect. Of course, she was a laid-back person, but she always made sure to keep things strictly professional with other ninja. On the other hand, when Tsunade was with Naruto, she seemed a lot calmer and talked with an air of familiarity. Ino had to admit that she was a little surprised that the legendary medic gave off the kind of warmth a mother would when talking to her child. Even the stern, yet concerned, voice was there. If she didn't know any better, she would have guessed that they were related. Now, let's get back to business, Tsunade declared, walking over to Naruto. She placed both hands on top of his cast, the two glowing with green chakra. You seem to be healing pretty well. But it might take a few days until we can take the cast off. How long? Naruto asked with a frown. The medic retracted from the arm and crossed her arms, closing her eyes in concentration. From what I've seen, your arm is doing well right now, but I want you to keep the cast just in case, she informed. If you don't strain your arm, I'm pretty sure you'll be well enough to take it off in around 2 days. Great, the blonde Chunin muttered, eyeing his cast. He turned back to the medic with a frown on his face. How's Sasuke? Tsunade sighed as she watched the two young ninja looking at her expectantly. He should be out of the hospital in a few days, she began, rubbing the bridge of her nose, but I wasn't able to do anything about his eye. The medic rose from her chair before breaking into a smirk, her eyes on Ino. Well, I guess we should start with your training for today. Ino laughed nervously, knowing she was bound for another day of torture. All right, she agreed hesitantly. Then I'll come too, Naruto declared with a smile. Since I can't do any training of my own, then I want to see how Ino is doing. Tsunade nodded. That will be for the best, that way I'll be able to check on you. The medic took a scroll from her desk and made her way out of the room. Let's get going. Shizun will take care of things while I'm gone. The couple followed after the legendary medic, wondering what she had in store. Naruto walked through the village with a very tired Ino with her head on his shoulder. The Chunin smiled as he cast a glance at the girl leaning against him. He had been surprised with how intense Tsunade's training was. He had wanted to train himself, but due to Tsunade being there, he wasn't allowed to move in the slightest. He could only watch as his girlfriend trained, and he was surprised to see how determined she was. No matter how tired she looked, she just kept on going. Naruto. Ino mumbled, her eyes closed in exhaustion. What is it? Naruto wondered in a light tone. A smile tugged at her lips. Do you want to have dinner at my house? She asked. It would be nice to have you over again, and besides, my parents would like to see you again. An image of Inoichi flashed through Naruto's head, remembering the last conversation they had had. If you ever do anything indecent to my little princess, I will castrate you with a spoon. He shuddered. He didn't know exactly what Inoichi meant, but what he did know was that the man was frightening. Are you sure your dad wouldn't mind? Ino giggled. Why did he have to be so intimidated by her dad? Come on, Naruto, you're acting like my dad hates you, she laughed, not noticing skeptical look coming from her boyfriend. He just likes to mess with you. I'm sure he likes you. Fine, he sighed out, but if we eat anything with a spoon, I'm getting out of there. Huh? Ino let out in confusion. What are your orders, Lord Orochimaru? Asked one of the 4 ninja kneeling in front of the snake summoner. Orochimaru watched his followers with an amused smile. He was sure that they would get their job done. They had been handpicked after all. His eyes landed on the ninja with orange hair. He hadn't been too sure of sending such an important tool, but he would be needed in convincing Sasuke. I want you to watch over my next body, Sasuke, Orochimaru began as he licked his lips. Make sure to watch him from the shadows. We won't want to expose you too quickly. When the time comes, I want you to persuade him into coming to me for more power. Is that understood? The 4 ninja raised their heads. Yes, Lord Orochimaru. Then you are dismissed, the snake summoner ordered. The 4 ninja disappeared in clouds of smoke, set on pleasing their lord. Hiruzen Sarutobi tried not to groan in annoyance at the council members sitting before him. First there were the heads of the Hyuga, Inazuka, Akimichi, Nara, and Yamanaka clans. Next were the 3 elders, Danzo, Koharu, and Hamura. Lastly there were a few members of the civilian council, only in the room for formality. Their constant bickering was getting on his nerves. I don't understand why we're making such a fuss about a kid's eye, the head of the Hyuga clan, Hayashi Hyuga, responded in a bitter tone. It's not as if the Sharingan is needed in the village. The Sharingan is needed not only because of its power but its reputation, Danzo responded simply. With the other villages knowing that we have an Uchiha in the front lines, they will certainly be intimidated. But he attacked a fellow ninja, the head of the Nara clan, Shikaku, stated calmly, such an attack's punishment is usually prison or death. But he's the last of his clan, Danzo countered. We can't have a clan die out just because of a brat not controlling his emotions. What about the other brat's punishment? One of the civilian council members argued. He attacked the last of the Uchiha and took his eye. The brat should be put to death. Don't even try to pin this on the kid, Inoichi responded with his eyes narrowed. He attacked the Uchiha for the well-being of his entire team. He should be praised for taking him down. Besides, you have no business here. The only reason you're sitting here is because none of us want to do the paperwork and you, being the lowest rank, have to. That's enough, the third scolded, suppressing the urge to chuckle at Inoichi's previous comment. The Hokage cleared his throat before continuing. I have already assessed the situation and have come up with a proper punishment. And what would that be, Lord Hokage? The Inazuka clan head, Tsum, asked. The Hokage let out a breath before gazing at the council. Sasuke will be put back in the academy. That is nonsense, Koharu, the third's old teammate, declared with a frown on her face. We need him to develop his Sharingan. How can he do that if he's not allowed to go on missions? That is what I have decided, the third declared. Also, he will not be able to leave his compound for any other reason than going to the academy. Danzo kept a calm expression on his face as he set his eyes on the Hokage. Lord Hokage, this is most unreasonable. We cannot hinder the progress of the young Uchiha. The third stood from his seat. It has been decided and not up for discussion. By placing him back in the academy, I'm not endangering the future of his clan in any way. There's nothing else to discuss. Danzo watched the old man leave, thinking of how to turn the events to his favors. By keeping Sasuke secluded from the outside world, he finally had a chance to approach him without the risk of any spies. This way he could train the boy and forge him into a ninja of his approval. Yes, he would not only control the Kyuubi but one of the last Uchiha as well. Ino smiled as she and Naruto sat on her home's table. They had gotten home a few minutes ago. Her mom, Miki, had been ecstatic to see Naruto again and offered to make them dinner. The young kunoichi had been glad to see that her boyfriend was a lot more comfortable around her mom, though he still kept a small distance from her. Miki emerged from the kitchen with a smile on her face, carrying a large bowl of rice. "Here we are." Ino's mom set the rice on the table before turning to walk away. "Mom, do you need help with setting up the table?" Ino asked with a small grin before turning to her boyfriend. "Naruto would love to help out." "Right?" Naruto's eyes widened slightly before smiling nervously. "All right." "Well then come on." Miki smiled as she and Naruto entered the kitchen. Ino watched them leave, letting out a small giggle at her boyfriend's nervous face. "I'm home," came her dad's voice from the front door. Inoichi entered the room with a smile on his face. "Hi, princess, how did your training go today?" "It went great," she informed as her dad sat on his usual seat, on the chair right in front of her. "How did your meeting go?" Inoichi frowned before turning at the sound of the kitchen's door opening. Naruto entered the room with a plate of food on hand, eyes widening when seeing the older ninja. Inoichi smirked in return, watching the young ninja stand there nervously. "So you're back already?" Inoichi muttered with a frown on his face. "Why yeah," Naruto smiled nervously as he set the food on the table and sat next to his girlfriend, shrinking under the man's gaze. Miki entered the room, instantly smiling at seeing her husband back. "Hi dear, how was your day?" she asked as she set the plates of food she held on the table. "It was all right," Inoichi responded with a smile of his own. "Good because I made a lot of food today," she explained before an apologetic look washed over her face, "but since there's no spare chopsticks, I'll have to give Naruto a spoon." Naruto's heartbeat rose as she set a spoon in front of him. "Isn't that great, kid?" Inoichi asked with a smirk. The blonde Chunin managed to nod as he took hold of the deadly weapon. "I guess I'll get going now," Naruto stated as he rose from his chair. His meal had been finished for a few minutes, and they had just talked about anything that came to mind. It was fun, but he felt like he was intruding by being there. "It was nice to have you over," Miki assured with a smile. Naruto nodded in return and gave a small wave before beginning to walk away. "I'll walk you out then," Ino announced as she followed after her boyfriend. The couple reached the door and walked out, welcoming the feel of the cool breeze that greeted them as soon as they set foot outside. Ino suddenly took hold of his hand and pulled him towards her, her lips meeting his in a light kiss. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise before closing as he returned the kiss a little clumsily. The two broke apart and gazed into each other's eyes, a smile gracing the girl's features. "I missed you." "I missed you too," Naruto responded as he gave her a quick peck on the lips before walking away, turning to wave one last time before continuing on his way home. He let out a sigh of relief as soon as he was alone. Inoichi made him really nervous, and he swore that he saw him scanning the spoon a couple of times. The blonde let out a chuckle as he made his way home. At least he would be safe for another day. "Hey Naruto," a familiar voice called from behind him. The blonde turned to come face to face with Inoichi. A sudden wave of fear struck him as the older man walked right past. "Follow me." Terror can make a person do stupid things. In this case it made Naruto follow after the man, knowing full well that it would put him in danger. The older man suddenly jumped into one of the nearby rooftops, throwing him a look before leaping away. "Wait up," Naruto called as he jumped after him, leaping through rooftops while making sure not to strain his arm. Inoichi simply went faster, much to the annoyance of the young Chunin. He followed after the man with no idea of where they were going. He looked around the area and noticed that they were heading straight for the training grounds, a wide open space that was perfect for combat and testing out abilities. "He's finally going to kill me," he screamed in his head. The older ninja jumped once more, disappearing into an area filled with trees. Naruto followed after him, preparing to land on a branch, but stopped when seeing Inoichi standing in a small clearing. The Yamanaka made his way towards two decent-sized rocks and sat in one of them, motioning the blonde to do the same. The blonde Chunin sat on the rock next to Inoichi and put on a look of confusion, having no idea of what the man would want. "I just want to have a talk with you," Inoichi stated as his gaze turned to the star-filled sky. Naruto watched the man anxiously, expecting any kind of threat. "I wanted to thank you for spending time with my daughter." He hadn't been expecting that. She's regaining the determination she had back when she was younger. "I can tell that she's really happy." Naruto turned his gaze to the sky also, watching the bright stars illuminate the sky. "You two actually remind me of Miki and myself when we were dating," he stated with a chuckle, "but anyway, I came here to tell you something important." "What is it?" Naruto asked, with a look of confusion. "I know that I'm a little intimidating, but remember," he began before turning to Naruto with a small grin, "if you're ever in trouble of any kind and need help, remember that my family and I are always willing to help you out." Naruto's eyes widened as the man stood up, dusting his pants as he let out a sigh. The man turned to the blonde and gave a light wave before disappearing in a cloud of smoke. The young Chunin couldn't help but smile. He guessed that Inoichi wasn't that bad. It had been 2 days since Naruto's team got back from the Sand Village. On those 2 days big things had happened. A few Leaf Ninja had been sent over to the sand to negotiate with the council and maintain peace. They agreed on a Shinobi exchange program where they would send a genin or chunin to each other's villages as a sign of trust. Another thing that had happened was Sasuke finally being let out of the hospital. He had been outraged about going back to the academy and made it his duty to get out of it as soon as possible. None of the Rookie 9 had seen him though since he had been placed under house arrest and he wouldn't let anyone enter. It was now morning as Naruto walked out of the hospital with a smile plastered on his face. He wore his usual outfit but no cast, something he had been waiting for. No cast meant that he could train once again, and this time he would train harder than ever. Since he wouldn't be able to use the fox's chakra, he would need to train until he dropped in order to get stronger. He didn't want to have anyone hurt on missions anymore. What should I train in first? Naruto wondered as he made his way to the training grounds where he and Jiraiya would usually go. It was away from the rest of the training grounds and had a river that he could use to expand his training. He thought back on his last mission with a frown. He had lost all of his chakra rather quickly and forced to use the foxes. "My jutsu still take too much chakra," he muttered with a frown. Jiraiya had explained that the worse the chakra control, the more chakra wasted when using them. "Looks like I'll need to train my chakra control," he concluded with a grin. "Talking to yourself, kid," a familiar voice called out. Naruto turned around to see his master standing before him with a grin on his face. "Looks like you've healed up." Naruto smiled, throwing his right hand in the air. "I'm all better now, Jiraiya-sensei. Now I can train even harder than before." "Did you already forget?" Jiraiya sighed out in annoyance. Seeing the confused look on his student's face, he got his answer. "I have a surprise for you now that you can use your arm again." Naruto's face immediately lit up. "I remember now," he exclaimed in excitement. "So what is it? A new jutsu?" Jiraiya crossed his arms with a frown on his face. "What did I tell you about jutsu? Jutsu doesn't make the ninja." Naruto muttered with a roll of his eyes. "Exactly," the Toad Sage grinned. "Anyway, your surprise is in the training grounds we usually train at. Just go there and you'll see your surprise." "Thanks, Jiraiya-sensei," Naruto smiled before running off towards the training grounds, excitement filling his eyes. Jiraiya watched him leave with a smirk on his face. "Don't thank me yet, kid." Naruto made it to the training grounds, his eyes darting around the area. There was the usual waterfall on the side, the small river and the many trees that surrounded the area, but he found no sign of what could be a surprise. His head suddenly perked up when hearing something whizzing through the air. Not thinking twice, he leaned his head to his left, avoiding a kunai that managed to graze his cheek, leaving a trail of blood that ran down his face. He prepared to move away but was stopped by two hands holding his shoulders firmly. What the? Naruto trailed off before feeling something wet and hot run across his cut. The young ninja shivered in disgust but couldn't shake the feeling of familiarity. Do you remember me, brat? Anko asked as she pushed the blonde away. Naruto rose to his feet and glared at the older ninja. You're that crazy lady from the Chunin exams. Anko smirked at the nickname. I guess you could say that, she began before taking out a kunai. She felt a tinge of amusement as the blonde ninja's stance grew tense. The snake mistress placed the kunai on her index finger and began to spin it in place with a smirk on her face. And you're the big-mouthed brat from the Chunin exams, right? What are you doing here anyway? Naruto asked with a frown. He was not comfortable around her. She reminded him of Orochimaru somewhat. I owe the big pervert a favor, Anko began with a frown on her face. He asked me to teach you some taijutsu and other useful skills for Shinobi. So this is his idea of a surprise, he thought bitterly, picturing his master's grinning face. The Chunin looked at Anko with a scowl on his face, figuring that more training couldn't be a bad thing. So, when do we begin? Anko smiled as she licked her lips. She stopped twirling the kunai on her finger and flicked her wrist, sending the projectile straight for the blonde. Naruto, not one for getting hit by the same thing twice, sidestepped the incoming weapon but froze when he realized that Anko had disappeared from sight. He slipped into his taijutsu stance and focused his eyes on the area around him, waiting for anything that would give out her location. A sudden blur threw him off guard, the snake mistress appearing before him in a cloud of smoke. Now, she declared as she threw a punch. The third Hokage sat behind his desk with a pipe on his mouth. A trail of smoke left his pipe as he stared at his old student with a serious look on his face. It had been only moments ago that Jiraiya had arrived saying that he had a new lead on the Akatsuki and had to leave the village once more. When do you expect to come back? The third Hokage asked as he took a drag out of his pipe. Jiraiya shrugged with a grin on his face. I'm not sure, but this leads always take about a week, he began as he crossed his arms, but the thing I came here for was to tell you that I plan on taking Naruto on that training trip when I get back. I see, the Hokage nodded, I'll get the paperwork ready. Remember that Naruto will still take missions on occasions. I got it, old man, the Toad Sage responded with a grin, it will be helpful on his training anyway. The third let out another trail of smoke, his expression growing tired. I'm planning on naming my replacement. Being Hokage is draining and I'm getting tired. The Toad Sage smirked. I guess you're going to get Tsunade to run things, right? He asked. The third simply nodded in response, showing that he was correct. That's great. She's qualified for the job and I'm sure she'll grow fond of the idea. The third let out another trail of smoke. I really hope so. Ino panted with her hands on her knees, trails of sweat running down her face. Tsunade stood in front of the genin with a smirk on her face, a sign that told Ino that their training hadn't even started. The two were on their usual training spot that was a little secluded from the rest. Ino found it to be a calming place since it was surrounded by trees and covered with healthy grass. She had arrived only an hour ago and was already getting tired. Tsunade had greeted her with a taijutsu-only spar that was still going. Her eyes narrowed when her master began to approach her, both fists held back as she ran. Ino stood her ground, her eyes focused as her fists clenched. Ino watched as Tsunade threw a right hook, aiming right at her yaw. She quickly ducked the blow and quickly turned to her master's left hand, seeing it already heading straight for her face. Without thinking, Ino met the punch with an open palm, avoiding getting hit. Her victory was outlived as Tsunade's punch pushed her hand aside and made contact with her right cheek. Ino let out a cry of pain as she sailed through the air before falling on the ground. That's enough of taijutsu, Tsunade declared, a proud look on her face. She walked over to her student and extended her hand to help her up. You did good to block my attack. It looks like you're finally grasping the basics of your new taijutsu stance. Right. Ino muttered as she tapped the bright red mark on her cheek. The kunoichi yelped in pain before letting out an annoyed sigh. She was sure that it would swell in a few hours. Turning to her teacher, she crossed her arms. Can't you heal this? The medic smirked. I told you before, she began, from now on I won't heal any of the wounds you take during training. You have to do it yourself. Take it as a way to motivate you. Ino grumbled, further amusing the medic. We're starting a new training exercise that will help you control medical chakra better. Really? What is it? Ino asked in interest. Tsunade set her fist in front of her before a blue chakra flared around it. I will be teaching you how to use chakras to enhance your attacks, she declared with a grin. Ino smiled in excitement, really liking the new training. The chakra left Tsunade's hand as she crossed her arms and began to explain, the more chakra control you have, the more powerful your attacks will be. I don't expect you to get this quickly, but practicing it while you're taking your fist steps into medical jutsu will help you out a lot. All right, Ino declared with a grin, let's start already. The medic smiled, all right then. Is that all you've got? Anko taunted as she ran at the blonde brat once more. She had never seen the Toad-style taijutsu before, but was sure that it wasn't being used to its full potential. After all, the taijutsu style came from a Sannin. Naruto growled as he ran at the snake mistress. From what he'd seen, Anko's taijutsu style relied on close combat, meaning that his only choice was to attack then move away before she could retaliate. Not what he usually did, but he decided to give it a try since it seemed that Anko was too engrossed on the spar. His eyes narrowed as the kunoichi threw a jab aiming for his midsection. The blonde pushed the jab away with an open palm, leaving her exposed. Not wasting any time, he threw a punch with his right hand, aiming at her stomach. Anko smirked as she used her other arm to cover the attack. Naruto watched a light twitch on the kunoichi's leg and quickly jumped away, barely avoiding a kick. He tried to turn his body so that he could land on his feet, but suddenly felt something wrap around his ankles tightly. His eyes widened when he noticed a pair of snakes coming from Anko's sleeves. The kunoichi smirked before slamming him against the ground, kicking up a small cloud of dust and gaining a loud cry of pain from the blonde. The blonde growled as he sat up, eyes glaring at the older ninja. What the hell was that? I thought that this was a taijutsu-only spar. Anko smirked. I never said anything about not using ninjutsu. More snakes emerged from her sleeves, wrapping tightly around the blonde's midsection. Her smirk grew when she watched him struggle. She hated to admit it, but the old perv had been right. The brat had a lot of promise. From light taijutsu spar she was able to get an idea of how the blonde fought and was impressed. All right then. You passed my little test, she announced as she dropped her hold on the blonde, watching him kneel on the ground with trails of sweat on his face. I'll teach you some kick-ass moves. Naruto looked at the woman oddly. What kind of test had that been? Now get your ass off the ground so we can get started, she scolded with a disapproving frown. You're the one that knocked me against the ground, he muttered bitterly. First thing I'll do is teach you the stances, Anko informed with her hands on her hips and an exited smile on her face. That'll take about a minute or two, so we'll have the rest of the day to see you use those stances in a spar. If you use any other style other than what I'm about to teach you, well, let's just say that it won't be pretty. Naruto's right eye twitched. It was impossible to learn a new taijutsu style that quickly, much less use it in a spar so quickly. He was lucky to have clones since it would keep him from getting his ass kicked too bad. On top of that, if she sparred like she did only moments ago, then he would be lucky to walk the next day. This woman is trying to kill me, Naruto concluded as Anko smirked. The sun was setting as Naruto faced Anko. He sported a few scratches on his face, his long-sleeved shirt was drenched in sweat, and his breathing was uneven. His eyes were focused on his current sparring partner. He found it hard not to groan. She didn't even look fazed by the hours they had spent sparring. In fact, she looked as amused as ever. A short distance away, a few clones could be seen training on the new taijutsu style. He had been relieved to know that Anko had approved of the method, since she had said that the faster he learned, the better their spars would be. He was already familiar with the basic stances thanks to the many clones he had training. Unfortunately, most of the clones had already dispersed by ricochet kunai, courtesy of Anko, though he didn't really know if they had been accidents, as she sported a smirk each time one was killed. He turned back to the kunoichi, knowing that it wasn't time to think of other things. Slipping into his new taijutsu stance, his eyes narrowed on the opponent. He shifted his weight to his left leg and waited for some kind of opening. She suddenly shifted weight in one foot, giving him the opening desired. The Chunin shot off the ground and charged at the older ninja, his left arm on his side while the right was set in front of his body. He jumped in the air as he twisted his body to the right, throwing a punch with his left arm as he did so. Anko smirked as she easily caught the fist, feeling a bit of pain from the momentum the punch had gained, before using her other arm to throw a jab at the blonde's stomach. Naruto raised his right knee, blocking the attack, before using his other leg to kick at Anko's arm. He pushed against the arm with his leg, using the momentum to push himself off her grip. Landing a few feet away from Anko, he bent his knees and jumped at her once more, throwing a jab with his right hand. Anko easily knocked the hand aside before throwing an uppercut to the boy's chin. The blonde's eyes shut in pain as he sailed through the air. He gritted his teeth as he set his eyes on the ninja as he sailed through the air. Losing sight of her, even when being knocked around, always resulted in a painful kick to his chest. Quickly twisting his body, he took out a couple of kunai, flicking them at the older ninja without missing a beat. Anko took out her own kunai and flung it towards the incoming projectiles, impacting against one of them as she jumped after the blonde. Naruto's eyes widened as she extended her hand and caught the second kunai without much trouble, before flinging it right back at him. The blonde quickly ran through hand signs, putting a hand around his mouth. Wind style, devastation, a powerful gust of air shot out of his mouth, blowing the kunai away without any trouble. He landed on the ground and let out a sigh of relief. That kunai had been to close. Idiot! Anko yelled in anger, appearing behind him in a cloud of smoke. She kicked the blonde on the back, earning a yelp of pain as he turned to face the kunoichi with a glare. I told you no to use ninjutsu. What the hell? Naruto yelled back, you just tried to kill me. Was I supposed to let the kunai stab me? You were supposed to knock it away with any kind of weapon. Any ninja with a brain would have done that, the snake mistress countered. I told you not to use ninjutsu, but that didn't mean that you were out of long-range attacks. You did use kunai, but only once. Shinobi are supposed to use every available resource as a weapon, something that you didn't do. Naruto crossed his arms, letting out a sigh. Fine, he let out, I'll keep it in mind. Anko smiled. Good, because we're done for the day, she announced as she began to walk away, turning her head to the bond. Let's go. We're gonna go get something to eat. You can leave the idiot troop behind if you want. HEY was the collective shout of the Naruto clones, all glaring at Anko. Naruto chuckled nervously before following after his new sensei. One thing he had learned was that when his clones were pissed, they tended to do stupid things, like yell insults and get him in trouble instead of them. Wait up! Naruto called with a frown as he followed after the kunoichi. Ino smiled in contempt as she sat on a river's edge. Her feet were dipped in the water, cooling off a bit after another day of training. Her cheeks were flushed and her face held a few trails of sweat. Part of her wanted to just dive in the water, but knew that she would end up smelling bad. She gazed at her hands as her smile grew. It was the first time, in a long time, that she had seen such improvement on her skills. After training on chakra control with Tsunade for hours and hours, she finally got to see the results. She had used a few of her water jutsu and had been surprised with how much easier they had come out. It was as if they were second nature to her. The kunoichi turned to her teacher, the older woman putting the many books she had forced her student to read in scrolls. Master Tsunade, Ino called with a confused look on her face. Tsunade turned to her student with a questioning look. Why was it so much easier to use my jutsu? I know that I've been working on chakra control, but I never thought it would improve that much. It wasn't just the chakra control exercises, Tsunade explained after a brief pause. It was also because of your medical chakra training, she began, getting back to sorting the scrolls. Medical chakra is a lot like water. It flows and gives life. Think of it as an advanced form of water control. Ino nodded, taking her feet off the river and getting up. I got it. She walked over to her teacher and took a few of the scrolls on hand. Long story short, if I train my medical chakra, my water jutsu will get stronger, right? Tsunade nodded as she finished with the scrolls. You're kind of right, she admitted. Let's get going, she ordered as the two began their usual stroll back to the village. The medic turned to her student once more, wanting to explain further. Remember that chakra control helps reduce the amount of chakra wasted on a jutsu. That means that your jutsu will not only be stronger, since you get to control where the chakra goes exactly, but you'll be able to use them beyond your past limit. Also, we've been working on your chakra capacity, which means that now you'll be able to use a lot more jutsu than before. Ino grinned. She was finally getting there. Of course it would take time to make a large improvement, but she knew to be patient. Her training was going well and she didn't need to rush it. Now she would get to really help out instead of hiding behind her teammates. She couldn't wait to get stronger. Naruto let another stick of dango into his mouth, the sweet taste running through his mouth. He chewed on his food as he looked at his new sensei oddly. She ate the meal with a smile on her face, her eyes closing in contempt with each bite. He had never seen someone enjoy a meal that much. What are you looking at, brat? Enko as she gulped down her food. Nothing, Naruto sighed out, watching as the snake mistress took her sake cup and drank its contents, setting the cup on the table before going back to her dango. Isn't eating sake and dango a little weird? Enko smirked as she used a napkin to wipe her mouth. I'm insulted, she frowned. Whatever gave you the idea that I was normal? Good point, the blonde muttered, slumping his head on the table. He closed his eyes and let out a yawn. Today's training had been more than demanding and, judging from the lack of memories from his clones, it was still going somewhere on the forest. Look alive, kid, Enko scolded with a frown. Naruto glared at her, exhaustion written all over his face. She couldn't help but grin. It's not right to just ignore your guest, right? Naruto's ears perked up. Guest? The snake mistress smirked as she rose from her chair. Sorry I didn't before, but the loser of our little sparring match was going to pay for dinner. She took one final gulp of sake before ruffling the Chunin's hair. Later, brat. We're gonna start our training tomorrow. Morning at around 7, with that the kunoichi disappeared in a cloud of smoke, shocking some of the civilian bystanders. You are paying for this, right? A rather large man with a shaved head and bushy gray mustache stated with a glare. Naruto gritted his teeth as he reached for his wallet. She would regret this. Ino strolled down the streets of Konoha, making her way home. The sun was setting and the streets were a little crowded. She could see a few couples walking hand in hand and she couldn't help but let out a pout. Naruto had gotten home and they still hadn't gone on a proper date. With all of the training going on, they didn't have too much time to spend together. She made a mental note to ask him on a date later. Hey Ino, a voice called out. Ino turned to her side to see Shikamaru walking towards her, his steps really slow and his eyes closed in irritation. What is it? She wondered. It wasn't usual for Shikamaru to look for people. The lazy Chunin let out a sigh and rubbed the back of his neck. I was assigned to the Shinobi exchange program, he began. Ino's eyes widened slightly at the bit of news. It seemed a bit rare to send a clan member to the sand. Anyway, he continued, I will be leaving tomorrow morning and wanted you to tell the people I know, save them the trouble of asking around. I'll probably be back next week. What a pain in the ass. Fine, Ino sighed out, figuring that he had never really asked her for anything. Shikamaru nodded, digging his hands on his pockets. I'm off then, he muttered before walking away. Ino let out a small laugh. He was getting a bit more serious about being a ninja, but it didn't change the fact that he was lazy. She didn't think that anything could change that. The kunoichi resumed her trek back home, wondering who should be the first to know. It was dark as two Umbu watched over the last of the Uchiha, Sasuke. The young ninja was currently punching a log rigorously. His movements were slow, but it was to be expected as he had just been sent out of the hospital a few days ago. The Umbu continued to watch over the Uchiha before their head snapped to the side, hearing the sound of crunching leaves. The two nodded at each other before rushing at the direction the sound came from, jumping through the branches of the nearby trees. Their heads suddenly perked up before stopping dead on their tracks and jumped down to the ground just as two strings of webs hit the tree branch where they had just been. The ground beneath them suddenly gave out, a large crater forming beneath them. They jumped away from the ground, but were suddenly struck by two large arms, belonging to a large ogre. The two Umbu crashed on the ground. The ground beneath them suddenly rose and covered their bodies, leaving only their heads exposed. For shadows walked towards the fallen ninja. The Umbu watched as a figure raised its fist to attack. Blood dripped from Sasuke's knuckles as he punched the training log with pure hatred. It wasn't fair. He had been stripped off his title as ninja, now a mere academy student. He was forced to stay on his house, which meant that he wouldn't be able to get any proper training done. And most of all, he had gotten his Sharingan taken from him and the culprit was still running around without a care in the world. It just wasn't fair. Naruto, he growled as he punched the log, more blood splattering from his knuckles. He raised his fist once more before hearing a loud impact coming from the outside of his family's compound. What was that? He lowered his arms and walked towards the source of the noise, his steps loud on the quiet compound. His eye narrowed as four shadows jumped over the stone wall surrounding the compound. Sasuke's Sharingan came to life as he leapt at one of the shadows, throwing a punch when close enough. His fist suddenly came to a sudden halt, a larger fist covering his own. With the dash he was cut off as a large fist met his face, knocking him against the ground. Using momentum, Sasuke managed to roll with the impact and raise to his feet, slipping into his taijutsu stance as the four shadows landed in front of him. Now in the moonlight he could see their appearance. One was a girl with red hair, wearing a black hat with bandages on the sides and a tan tunic with black shorts and shinobi sandals. Another had 6 arms and wore an outfit similar to the first girl's. The other, who he supposed was the one that attacked him due to his large size, had dull orange hair and an unusual hairstyle. The last of the group had orange spiky hair and wore the same outfit as the others, though he seemed different somehow. "Fuck," the girl of the team growled, "don't tell us something fucked up your eye." "I have nothing to tell you," Sasuke responded, rather smugly, his Sharingan focusing on the opponents, noticing their headbands. "Tell me. What is Sound Trash doing in my compound?" "Who's going to tell him?" Tayuya, the largest of the team, asked, ignoring Sasuke's taunt. "I don't want to deliver this kind of news to Lord Orochimaru." Tayuya scowled. "Don't ask stupid questions. We have the messengers, we don't need to tell him anything directly." She turned back to the Uchiha, eyes narrowing instantly. "You're coming with us." Sasuke chuckled. "You're nothing but trash." He smirked as he looked at the 4 sound ninja in front of him. They wouldn't pose much challenge. After all, sound shinobi were nothing but a bunch of freaks with no skill. "I'm going to make you regret setting foot here." "You're very confident," Tayuya smirked. "There's 4 of us and 1 of you. You look like shit and lost an eye while we're rested and experienced in killing. Things don't look too good for you, bastard." The Uchiha ran through hand signs. Fire style, fireball jutsu, a large fireball left his mouth, heading straight for the Sound 4. All Sound Ninja jumped away from the attack and headed for the Uchiha. Kidamaru smirked as he spit towards the Uchiha, his saliva turning into a web as it wrapped around one of his ankles. Sasuke growled and took out a kunai before running it over the web, but let out a growl when it did nothing. "What kind of web is this?" Sasuke exclaimed as Jirobo closed in on him. Not wasting any time, he ran through hand signs once more. "Wind style, devastation," he yelled as a powerful gust of air left his mouth. "This jutsu again." Jirobo muttered as he continued to run at the Uchiha, the wind doing nothing to stop his charge. He smirked as he threw a punch at the Uchiha's stomach, blood spilling from his mouth as he doubled over in pain. The Sound Ninja followed with a kick to Sasuke's face, hurling him through the air from the cheer force. Kidamaru smirked as he pulled on the web, smacking the Uchiha against the ground. Sasuke let out a cry of pain as he laid, completely vulnerable, on the ground. His whole body was in pain, his jaw felt as if it was being crushed, his stomach ached, and the exhaustion from his training finally caught up with him. For now he could do nothing but look at the sound ninja. He was at their mercy. "What the hell do you bastards want?" Sasuke spat. Tayuya smirked as she stepped on his chest, earning another groan from the Uchiha. She leaned towards him. "We don't want anything with you," she admitted before raising her foot and slamming it against his chest. Sasuke let out a cry of pain, his eye glaring at the ninja. "Lord Orochimaru is interested in you. He wants to make you one of his men. But that be why the looks of things you're not strong in the least." Sasuke glared in pure hatred, the curse seal hot against his skin as black marks covered his face. "It feels good, doesn't it?" Kidamaru suddenly asked, the power of Lord Orochimaru coursing through your body. "Did you know that it can grow to unbelievable levels?" What? Sasuke grunted, a little interested in the idea of gaining more power. "You heard him, shithead," Tayuya growled, putting more pressure on the Uchiha's chest. "If you were to come with us, then you would gain this kind of power." "Who knows? Lord Orochimaru has a lot of experiments. Maybe he'll be able to get your eye back." "There's more ninja coming," the quiet ninja of the group suddenly stated. Kidamaru chuckled and shook his head. "Who cares? We killed those other Umbu. I'm sure we'll kill the ones that are coming." "Remember what Lord Orochimaru said," Jirobo broke in. "He said that the Umbu weren't only composed of Jonin. Remember that the ones we killed weren't very strong." "Fatso is right," Tayuya nodded, ignoring the glare from Jirobo. She stomped on Sasuke's chest one more time before turning to walk away. "Remember what we told you here, Uchiha," she said without turning around. She approached her teammates and gave a firm nod. "Let's get going." Sasuke watched the ninja leave, the dark marks around his face disappearing. He had to admit that he was interested in the prospect of more power, but he still didn't trust the snake summoner. There was something else that Orochimaru wanted, of that he was sure, but didn't know exactly what. The Uchiha cleared his head. He heard the sound of footsteps, which meant that the ninja would be taking him away. He would rest for now and go over things the following day. Kakashi stood in front of the memorial stone. He found himself doing this whenever he was having trouble or when he just felt a bit melancholic. It brought him a sense of peace, his own way of handling stress, other than his reading, of course. Looking at the stone, he couldn't help but notice that he had been coming here more and more lately. Things weren't very good right now. He had been thinking of what would become of his team. Their meetings had been scarce in the last few weeks, and they would be non-existent until Sasuke was let out of his home. This meant that he would have to meet with Naruto and Sakura, but that would also be in few occasions since his blonde student had been rather busy lately. This was assuming that there wouldn't be any bad blood between his students, which was very likely at this point. His eyes lingered on the names of his old team. He wondered what his mentor, the fourth Hokage, would have done in his place. "Kakashi-sensei," a sudden voice broke him out of his thoughts. Turning around, Kakashi couldn't help but feel surprised. In front of him was a very unlikely visitor. "It's rather rare to see you here, Sakura," he admitted, watching the young kunoichi look down in what he presumed was nervousness. "What can I help you with?" I want to get stronger," Sakura let out after a short pause. She looked down with a scowl on her face. "I know things are not good on the team, but I want to be able to stand next to Sasuke and Naruto. I want to help them." Kakashi looked at her oddly. "Help them with what?" The kunoichi clenched her fists, thinking back at what was happening to her team. Sasuke being influenced by the seal Orochimaru had given him. Naruto going out on missions all the time. This stuff weighed on her. She felt powerless. She felt useless. She didn't want to be left out anymore. "Everything," she admitted. "I want to be able to go on missions with them. I'm not sure of what happened on their last mission, but it felt as if I could have done something if I had been there." "I can see that you're really determined," Kakashi said, his eyes calculating. "I'll find someone to help in your training, but before that I have to tell you something," he decided. If he didn't tell her now, then things would get bad. He needed to tell her in order to prevent her from doing something stupid. Sakura looked at him oddly. He had gotten gloomy all of a sudden. Sasuke lost his eye because of a fight he had with Naruto. Naruto sat on his couch with his arms extended in a show of exhaustion. It had been a while since he had trained so hard, but was glad that he was. His clones had finally finished their training, and he was a lot more familiar with the taijutsu style. It would, of course, take a little more time to get it to a point where he could use it in a real fight, but he was glad nonetheless. Things were looking good. He gazed at his small apartment, noticing that he had yet to clean it up. He scowled before a certain item caught his eye. A lone book, set on the small table that stood in front of his couch. It was the sealing book Jiraiya had given him some time ago. He had forgotten all about it. With the new training and missions he had had, time to read over the book had been scarce. He picked up the book and flipped through the pages, a little uninterested by the concept of reading. Jiraiya knew how he loathed sitting down and reading, but the sage had been right in telling him to think of it as a kind of training. That thought alone was enough to drive him through pages on occasions. But if he ever found the subject too boring, he would just drop the book and go find something else to do. He guessed that he didn't have the best attention span, all right, Naruto muttered as he began reading where he had left off last time. Sealing is an art in which the user is able to transport equipment to an alternate dimension of sorts. By adding chakra to a seal, see page 42 for details, the user is able to call back that equipment at the time of their choosing. The Chunin scowled before closing the book. He rose from his couch and went over to the kitchen, wondering if he had any leftover ramen. The book forgotten on the couch.
That's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on my other social media accounts. Anime God here, and I'm signing off.